Before we dive into this week's show, check out the show notes because for this week only, you get access to the Let's Get Digital bundle, of which I'm a contributor. So inside the bundle, you get access to 60 plus digital resources to build your online business, and you get access to my LinkedIn profile glow up, which is a new training I just recorded. It's going to help you optimize your profile. It's 100% free. So be sure to check the show notes for the link to join the Let's Get Digital bundle. Now let's get into today's show. Hi, and welcome to LinkedIn for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Julia Zata, a LinkedIn strategist and ghostwriter, and lover of all things practical when it comes to visibility strategies. This podcast is for service-based business owners who want to build their brand on LinkedIn, attract new clients, collaborators, and speaking engagements without overthinking every post or sounding like a corporate robot. And yes, we're going to keep it actionable and fun. Let's dive in. Hey, it's Julia, and today I want to talk to you about the 360 Brew. That's the name for the new LinkedIn algorithm. I've seen some interesting posts on LinkedIn last week from some experts that I follow who share data-backed. They were talking about this new algorithm, how it works, what it means for your personal brand on LinkedIn, and I want to go over this with you so that you know how this affects your brand. So let's start with Andy Lambert. He is a B2B content marketing specialist. What he's posted about the algorithm this past week are two things. Like, first of all, how LinkedIn is now surfacing in AI search, like when people search for information on ChatGPT or other AI platforms, there's been like a sudden rise of LinkedIn content being discovered. And so that's an interesting point that he makes that I'm going to break down. The other thing that he says is about the algorithm and how it works. So let's start from the top. The main changes in the algorithm is that now the algorithm is paying attention to what Andy calls topical signals. This means consistency in topic. For example, what your LinkedIn profile says, what your expertise is according to what you say on LinkedIn and the content you share, and also what your expertise is based on who is commenting and the richness of the comments that you get on your content. So he calls this topical consistency, and this is what matters most now that LinkedIn is trying to show your content to people that are consuming that kind of content. I'm going to dive into that a little bit deeper with some insights from Richard Vanderblom, who's an algorithm expert, but let's keep with what Andy Lambert is saying. So basically, he says that what you have in your bio as far as expertise and interests, what you talk about in your content informs the algorithm as to what your subject matter expertise is. And then also the type of engagement that you receive matters. For example, there's a lot of people using AI bots to post comments on other people's content for visibility. So that's penalized finally, because that's very annoying. And then also inauthentic comments are driving the algorithm to like crush your reach basically. And what he means by inauthentic comments is comment the word strategy if you want me to send you blah, 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 right? These trigger words work well on Instagram and Facebook because those platforms are partnered with ManyChat, like an automation tool, and it's used for lead generation. But you can't do that on LinkedIn, first of all, because you can't use a third-party tool to deliver that information to people requesting it. And now LinkedIn is also looking out for those calls to action and the engagement that comes along with it, so it can suppress the reach of those posts. So if you're using the same strategy for engagement on Instagram and on LinkedIn, I would recommend switching it up. And then a few more things about content on LinkedIn that Andy clarifies is about how hashtags don't help with reach. This is not new news. Hashtags have been kind of dead on most platforms for a while now since AI exists. And the reason for that is that the algorithms, not just on LinkedIn, but on any other social media platform, they can read your content. They can understand what you're talking about. So they don't need hashtags to categorize your content anymore. Before, hashtags put your content into a specific category. They were searchable for people looking for that particular content, but now we can just go to the search bar and type in the content that we're looking for, and the LinkedIn algorithm will show us content on that topic. There's no need to rely on hashtags anymore. So even though the algorithm doesn't penalize the use of hashtags, you can use them. It's just not going to do anything as far as reach or searchability anymore. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's not just true, by the way, for LinkedIn. Also, Instagram is limiting the number of hashtags that people can use. It used to be you could put 30 hashtags on a post, and now they're limiting it to 5. And they're saying the same thing over there, that hashtags aren't really going to help you get reach anymore because the AI can read what your content is about. They look at how people are engaging with your content over on Instagram, and based on that, they decide who sees more of your posts, right? So I'm mentioning Instagram just so that you can understand that the rules of how content works right now on social media platforms are all very similar. I feel like LinkedIn is a late bloomer in this category, like they're catching up late to the game compared to other social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, but that's just my opinion. It's not based on data, so keep that in mind. Then the next piece of information that Andy shares is that LinkedIn just became the most cited domain for professional queries in AI search. What does it mean? It means that LinkedIn posts, whether they're individual posts, whether they're newsletters or articles, they are appearing more and more when people search for that content using AI. And the interesting part about that is that this is true for content that's published on personal profiles, not company pages. If your content is relevant and it's well structured and adds value, your posts and your articles might be cited on, say, on ChatGPT or an AI search tool as a source, which means that now everyone who has a LinkedIn presence is a potential citation source. It could potentially be cited when people search for specific information on ChatGPT, Claude, or Perplexity, or whatever tool you use. And Andy makes some interesting points here. This is particularly interesting, not just for individual content creators that are entrepreneurs, but it's interesting for companies because most companies haven't adjusted their strategies to help the visibility of leaders, what's called employee advocacy. A lot of companies still don't help their employees to be visible and to have a voice on LinkedIn for the benefit of the company. And now the companies that aren't doing this are late to the game because now these people's content reaches beyond LinkedIn and includes AI search, which would really help any company become more visible. So this is super important for anybody who has a personal brand. Your content is potentially going to be cited in AI searches, which means more opportunities for visibility, more opportunities for trust building, and obviously lead generation and conversion. And then, according to Andy, 60% of AI discovery on LinkedIn comes from articles and 40% comes from posts. And what matters most is a content depth. So anywhere between 250 to 500 words. And when you're creating this content, you want to demonstrate expertise rather than try and generate engagement. And now the next source I wanted to cite is Richard Vanderblom. His area of expertise is the LinkedIn algorithm. He conducts independent studies to understand what's changing in the LinkedIn algorithm, and every year he puts out a LinkedIn algorithm report. Now, this is an independent study. It's not validated by LinkedIn, but his data is always very interesting and insightful. So Richard echoes what Andy is saying, which is basically that now this new algorithm can evaluate your whole presence. So not just individual posts, but it's looking at your profile. It's looking at the topics that you cover in your content. Who are the people who are commenting on your post? Do they validate your expert positioning? And is your content based on lived expertise, or is it just information? Because now the algorithm can understand your content and the context as well. It's harder to trick or game the system by using keyword stuffing or hashtags or even the commenting techniques that we were talking about earlier, like the AI generated comments or engagement pods. Richard Vanderbloom also says that because of these changes, it's very important to be consistent as far as the type of content that you share, and also to make sure that your content and your profile have a coherent message that they make sense together, because the LinkedIn algorithm is categorizing your entire brand based on your profile, based on the depth of your content, based on your network, based on the consistency in your messaging. And he even says that the LinkedIn algorithm can detect AI written content because it can spot those patterns and it might hold that against you. That said, the post that I sourced this from was clearly written with AI, so I don't know. But he's saying that from a strategy perspective, now LinkedIn is more of a long-term growth asset. So because the algorithm is also evaluating your behavior over time, you want to keep that consistent. We also know that since the algorithm has changed from recency to relevancy, you're not always going to see someone's post the minute they posted it. You might be shown people's content that is several weeks old because it's more in line with what you're consuming and the interests that you're demonstrating, which means that if you have like a time-sensitive piece of content, you have to find new ways to make sure that it gets seen by the people who you want to see it. But I think for me, the biggest takeaways from reading this information is that, okay, we understand that the algorithm can understand our entire brand. It can understand who we say we are, our contacts, our content, and it's looking for consistency of messaging. It's also looking for consistency of expertise. And so knowing that, which is not different than anything I've said before on this show, because before we were counting on people seeing a coherent message. Like when somebody looks at your profile and your messaging, you don't want them to be confused. You want them to have a clear picture. But now we also want the algorithm to get a clear picture so it doesn't penalize our content or crush our reach or minimize how much visibility we get. I think that a great place to start right now, if you haven't revamped your profile anytime in the recent future, you might want to give your profile a refresh. And if you need help with that, this week I'm participating in the Let's Get Digital bundle. My contribution to this bundle is a training called the LinkedIn Profile Glow Up, where I walk you through the different sections of my profile, how I've optimized them, and I guide you through how you can optimize your profile too. So the link to check that out is in the show notes. Doors are open from March 25th until April 4th. So anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this show. Connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me what you thought of it. Thanks for tuning in to LinkedIn for Entrepreneurs. If you found this episode helpful, please share it on LinkedIn or on your favorite social media platform. And if you really want to make my day, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more business owners find this show. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.